there is an assumption that UK and the West is forever going to be this beacon of freedom and opportunity that people want to migrate to. And UK is already not the country that I came here to like 18 years ago. And I think that is going to reverse. I actually think that we are going to see the migration in the other direction for people that do have the choice into different countries that perhaps don't have the same amount of issues when it comes to the integration of the multiple cultures. And I don't think the UK has done a particularly good job of integrating cultures. Essentially, I think, especially in the
I agree
recent
with you.
years.
I'm currently having a lot of renovation done on my house, and I am amazed that there are still so many Poles. But I don't think in 5 or 10 years' time there will be. As I've said already, partly simply look at the number of 20 to 30-year-olds in Poland based on falling Polish fertility over the last 30 years. And secondly, look at the wage differential. I mean, England's very nice in many ways. Poland's very nice. If you're in Poland and you want to leave, you're going to leave, you need some motivation to do that. And whether there are soft things like what's the culture like, there are harder things like what's the wage level like and how many people are there. But I think part of the reason we're not taking this fertility issue seriously is that we've had two very fortunate things in terms of immigration. First of all, Ireland has for almost centuries, you could say, been poorer and more fertile than Britain. And Britain, without almost thinking about it, was a huge pull. Loads and loads of Irish people came here. And I don't have many white British friends who don't have some Irish ancestry. So Ireland was a womb, effectively, for the British Isles. And Britain hugely benefited from an influx of Irish labour. Very often it was at the bottom end of the pecking order of the labour market. But, of course, Irish people integrated. In some ways, it took longer than you'd expect. I mean, I remember when the IRA bombs were going off. But there was no major social problem. I think most people, Irish people, were pretty well integrated in those days. Whether they continue to be Catholic, whether they continue to identify as Irish, the world carried on. So we've massively benefited from Ireland having a high fertility. Well, Ireland doesn't have a high fertility rate anymore, and the Irish have higher wages than the people in the UK. That doesn't mean we're not still getting people from Ireland. There's a two-way traffic, but the idea of mass immigration from Ireland is over. And I think Poland, in fact, the whole of Eastern Europe, it was another one-off boom that you actually had very well-educated people, people who could fit in culturally quite easily, who, because they'd been under communism for decades, was starting in a very bad place. And to come to somewhere like the UK was a big opportunity. You could come, you could work, you could save, and either stay and integrate or go home with some money. But I think that's over as well. And where there'll always be people, I think, for the foreseeable future, who would rather be in London than ... or Birmingham than ... But the ... is increasingly going to become the high fertility countries that are left and the poor countries that are left, which inherently have a poor education system, not very skilled people. And that will drag the economy down. And as you say, there are all sorts of issues about integration, complex issues about how you integrate people. I mean, I've said many times on podcasts, my parents are immigrants, you're an immigrant, we fit in, I feel 100% British, and if you don't, and you stay here, your kids probably will. It'd be nice if they speak Polish, they don't speak, they have a mixed identity, and so on. That's a different issue. But ultimately, it's going to be harder and harder if we think we can just bring in endless numbers of people, reasonably skilled. We're going to be disappointed. And of course, there is also a backlash, a populist backlash, which we see in many countries in Europe. The Front National in France is doing very well, may well be the next presidency. Meloni in Italy, the AfD in Germany, and Sweden in the Netherlands, which is to say, whether you like these parties or not, they exist. exist in a democratic system, and what they're telling the authorities that be is that the indigenous populations do not want endless flows of immigrants from all sorts of countries who eventually will put the indigenous element in a minority. Now, you can tut and say they're not very liberal, it's not very nice, you can approve of it, you can disapprove of it. I'm merely observing the fact that endless immigration, which low fertility and economic growth requires, are not politically acceptable in a democratic system.